Hi everyone, I'm Cass. I am your host today for tonight's alumni panel for LearningFuze. Super excited to have you all join us. I'm Cass, I'm the Program and Career Services Manager if you don't know me already. But I have the pleasure of introducing our alumni panel for tonight. So we do have Barbara, we have Frank, we have Isaac, and we have Spencer as well as Frank. So super excited to have all of them. Thank you. So how this goes is we're just going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves. And so all of our panelists come from a variety of backgrounds as well as experience levels in their current career, like in coding, right? And all of them has taken the full-time coding bootcamp, right? And so we'll be doing introductions for each of them. So awesome. Barbara, can you please introduce yourself? If you could give us your name as well as your what cohort you were part of, which one did you do, like in-person, remote, as well as your background and where do you currently work? I know it's a lot.
Okay, let's see if I remember all this. My name is Barbara, and I was in the cohort of October 21 last year, and I did the full immersion web development. I currently am a front-end engineer at Moogsoft, based in San Francisco, but I work remote. And my background was that I did 7 years of accounting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Frank, can you again give us your name? If you got all of that, let me know. I'll let you know if you forgot any of the details.
Spot on. Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Frank Bay, and I was in the cohort of 220, so February 2020. And I did it in person, but during that time, COVID was happening. So during my cohort, after the junior side, we had to go remote. So that was an interesting transition. And currently I work at a company called Wildfire Systems. And before bootcamp, I was in education.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Nina, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Nina. I was in cohort April 2020 or 420, take that as you will. One of the best cohort names. And before I switched careers, I was working in public policy. Never really felt right for me, even though I really care about the issues, just I didn't want it to be my job. So through that, I accidentally took a class in R, which is like a programming language to analyze data sets. Pandemic hit. I was like, what can I do? That's where I fell at LearningFuze, and I did a full-time remote bootcamp. And right now I'm currently working as a front-end developer at Telmex.
Awesome. And then Isaac, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Isaac. I'm from the 0621 cohort, so I was just before Barbara. Before LearningFuze, I was a marine biologist, environmental scientist, and that's where I got exposure to R, which kind of led to me taking going to LearningFuze. I currently work at a fintech company called Aspiration, based in Marina del Rey, as a backend software engineer.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Spencer.
Yo, I'm Spencer. I'm from cohort 1119, so I guess I'm the OG here. So I'm working currently as a software engineer at a startup called SageSpot. We are like pre-seed everything, so pretty much it's very small. I think I'm like employee number 10. Before then was working at Apple as a genius for a little while, quit my job, traveled the world for like a couple months, and then decided to hop in full immersion. So this was before the pandemic too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Also, I forgot to say, if you do have any questions for panelists, feel free to put it in the chat, or we will also have a Q&A session after in the second half of the alumni panel. Thank you all for introducing yourself. And, this is because I know you gave a little bit of your background, but and I know you also touched upon it too, but, this is a big question, especially it's like, why did all of you choose to pursue a coding bootcamp? And then also specifically LearningFuze? Right. So Spencer, since you just spoke, I'll let you also continue.
Yeah. So pretty much when I was traveling, I was super bored and I actually picked up the Harvard has like an introduction class. So I started out with that. Super good. Would recommend if you're still thinking about it, just as like an introduction to all of coding. And then when I got back, was looking at going back to school for computer science, stuff like that. Something I've always kind of like dabbled in and wanted. And then I found the coding bootcamp, LearningFuze, and kind of fell down the rabbit hole. And now I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Isaac, why did you join?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I had a little bit of exposure to R in college. I didn't like it that much, but I definitely recognized that it was like a pretty powerful tool. So after I finished my undergrad into the pandemic, so I had a lot of time while unsuccessful in my job hunt to take some online courses and some community college courses. And I think it was for Python, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then I was kind of looking around to see like, oh, hey, I think I'd actually kind of want to start a career in this. Did a little bit of research into boot camps nearby. And fortunately, my brother had a friend that also went to LearningFuze, and he recommended it to me. And after checking it out, I decided to follow through with it. And it's here I am.
Awesome. All right, Nina, why did you join? Oh, LearningFuze specific.
LearningFuze specifically. I think when you're doing the research, you basically are, I forgot what there's two websites which are basically the Yelp of boot camps, and LearningFuze, I could not really find a bad review, and I was like, this is too good to be true. But it seemed everyone genuinely really liked LearningFuze. So I did like an info session, and I was like, okay, this is cool. It seems like they really care versus like just trying to push out graduates. And then I did the two-week prep course once, didn't like it because it didn't feel right. And then I did it a second time, so I was sold. So if you're considering doing like the boot camp, you're not sure, and you like do the prep course more than once, that is normal. That was my experience. But yeah, I think the thing that really sold me is that like the instructors genuinely care. And also like if you're stuck in a portion of the program, like for example, the portion's split up into two parts. If you struggle in the first part, you can repeat it. And that was really striking to me, because some boot camps will literally just kick you out to keep their numbers up and their stats up, to be like, this many people graduate or this many people get jobs, but it's like how many of them actually graduated because they're kicking people out. So LearningFuze genuinely cares about people, and I kind of saw that. But also another thing is my brother-in-law signed up for the full-time program. I was like, oh shoot, if he's gonna do it, it's now or never for me. That was like the little push I needed.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Frank, what about you?
Yeah, so my pursuit is a little bit interesting, because during my time in around 2017, or 2018 as well, I was pursuing my elementary teaching credential. But at the same time, I was really interested in cryptocurrencies and crypto, not just like the money aspect, but the tech aspect as well. And so I went through a bunch of Reddit posts, and then I went through the rabbit hole and talk about pop-up development. And so it's like, you know what, maybe I want to check this out. And then the more I got into it, the more I got interested. And in choosing LearningFuze, I went through Google, just typed in, okay, coding bootcamp in LA, Irvine, all parts of Southern California. And then I read one review from LearningFuze actually, where I forgot her name actually, I know it starts with the S, but she was an elementary school teacher who decided to pursue a coding bootcamp at LearningFuze, and that's what kind of sold on to me. It's like, okay, if she could do it, then I want to go check this out. So yeah.
Awesome. I think you're talking about Stephanie Burkholm.
Stephanie, yeah.
So she's also, she's definitely, I think she's like a couple of years, well, quite a bit of years in already into her current position at Ministry Brands. Awesome. That's really great to hear. And Barbara, what about you?
So I started like getting into programming actually when I was in college. I took a class that was essentially programming for accounting. It was within Excel, so we learned like VBA, how to create macros. And I've always considered that, but since it was like my second to last semester, I just continued with my accounting career and fast forward to the pandemic, 2020, I was thinking, I'm like, is this really what I want to do? So I decided to like start talking to people, and I actually talked to quite a few alumni from LearningFuze unknowingly, and they weren't in any way connected with each other. So it was kind of crazy coincidence. So they ended up talking to me about it, giving me their input, and I ended up choosing LearningFuze because they all had like great jobs after the boot camp. They were highly recommending it, and they were saying the same thing like Nina and everyone else was saying. Instructors were really caring. They really want you to do well. And so that's ultimately how I ended up with this decision.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned it to you all before that the alumni panels are one of my favorite events to host, right? Especially since it's kind of a little bit of a recap and reflection, especially on your journeys. Because especially with like the full-time program, it's so intense, even with the part-time too, because you're also juggling like working full-time. All of the programs do have that level of intensity and expectation. Well, it's like, you know, having that level of structure for you, because you are the ones coming to us, right? For that level of structure, the instruction, career services, right? All that good stuff. And it's so amazing to be able to see all of you going from, especially as like career changers, like switching from one career to the next, and having such diverse and unique backgrounds, right? And so I know like Tim D also usually asks this, but when you do your final projects, but considering like the entire journey that you've been through in terms of changing your career and your life, what is one piece of advice you tell yourself before pursuing a coding bootcamp, or like when you first started your job search, right? So Barbara, what are your thoughts?
Wow, I guess one of my thoughts was that it's okay to start over. I had that mentality, kind of like, oh, I'm already so far in my career, like 7 years is a long time to invest in a career. And so it was really hard for me to like change from that mindset to be like, okay, you should actually pursue something you really want to do. Everyone starts somewhere, and like, I think the people say 50% of the like people who go to college, they don't end up working in the same field that they major in. So that was definitely me. So it was being okay with that, and to like put myself out there and to learn, which was also really difficult, essentially learning a new language. So it was a great experience, and probably one of the best decisions in my life.
Awesome. Frank, what about you? What is one piece of advice you tell yourself before pursuing a coding bootcamp, or like when you first started the job search?
I want to talk about the job search actually. So I think for the job search, I mean, when you go into coding bootcamp, when you come out of it in this field, the field is very vast. You know, there's like many sectors within it, and so I guess the thing to think about is, what type of tech stack do you want to be familiar with, and what area do you specifically want to go into? Like if you want to work with e-commerce, then Shopify stuff, things like that. If you want to go into crypto, be familiar with Web3.js and MetaMask and things like that. So it's kind of like honing down an area that you're interested in within coding. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Nina, what about you? What would you tell yourself?
I think my advice is applicable to both, just slightly different. I think imposter syndrome is something that everyone will face at one point. The bootcamp is very tough. The job search is very tough. And even once you start the job, and I know we'll talk about this later, your first couple months will be tough. And I don't think imposter syndrome ever fully goes away. But I think there's a difference between feeling like imposter versus being realistic with what you actually don't know. So it's like being like, oh, I feel like an imposter. But wait, actually, maybe my fundamentals are kind of weak. Let me do let me like hone in on certain things so I feel more confident. But then there's other times when you're genuinely just like downplaying yourself. So I think it's just learning to like be honest with yourself and like actually be like, hey, am I being an imposter here? Or is this imposter syndrome stemming from me like not being comfortable with something, and like just being like blunt with yourself, you know? Take care of yourself, but also like if you need to scratch up on your fundamentals and relearn them, like this stuff is hard and no one will blame you. When I was a TA, I felt like most of my job was to be a cheerleader for people, because if you don't need a boot camp and if this stuff is easy for you, like why are you putting the time and money and investment? So yeah, just remind yourself that like you will learn it eventually. So just, yeah, imposter syndrome, just take it with a grain of salt, and but also be honest.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Isaac, what about you?
I think I'll talk more on the job hunt like Frank did. Because for me personally, I think going into the job hunt was pretty stressful. I think for like kind of everybody here in the boot camp, like your biggest fear coming out of it is that you'd invested this kind of money and this kind of time, and you'd come out of it and there's kind of no job to show for it, which is honestly pretty terrifying. To anyone starting it, it's just like, I think for me, things really started kicking off when I started doing the like 30 apps a week, set these goals for myself, and just make sure I'm continuously churning out these applications, regardless of whether or not you're getting to like really deep in interview rounds. As long as you're getting these interviews and putting yourself out there, you're getting better at the interviews, you're getting more experience, and the offer will come. It only takes one company, honestly. So just keep at it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so like valid, especially like, you know, you might have like 300, 400, like 600, 800 applications, but it really all it takes is that one, you know, to say yes to you. Right. So thank you. And then Spencer, what about you?
Yeah, so the first part, starting out, I think the biggest thing is you get out what you put in. And so you really got to put down the hours, put down like the knowledge, what you want to learn, you know, be open to anything. Super important. Don't think you know it all, because you definitely don't. Even I'm going to call Tim out. He probably doesn't know it all, but he's constantly learning. So it's good. And then for the job hunt, the biggest thing, mine was right when the pandemic hit. So like no one was hiring, which sucks, but just don't give up. That's like honestly number one. Just like everyone's saying, it only takes one. So put it out there. Do leak code. Leak code really saved my life. It was awesome. Do an app here and there. Just apply everywhere. So
awesome. And then Nina, you commented +1 to the numbers game. You applied to over 300.
Yeah, from my experience, the two ways to get a job was a numbers game or networking. I see people who literally get a job right away for networking, and I got interviews because of networking. But the one job that I actually got in the end was the one that I like mass applied and I forgot I even applied to until I got the email, and I was like, what was this company? So yeah, it just, whatever works for you in the end. So yeah, networking is important, but in the end, it was like the numbers game that got me my job.
All it takes is the one. Yes, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, like another thing is like, even if you don't make it past like an interview stage, that's okay. That's still interview experience for you to become better for, you know, potentially that one. Right. And another thing is what I've noticed is sometimes you might think you botch an interview, but maybe they still continue to move forward because maybe your interview was better in comparison to everyone else's. So definitely don't like stress yourself. Well, don't like put too much pressure on yourself on like being perfect, especially during the interviews, because, you know, learning how to code, that's a whole learning process, but then also, you know, doing the interviews, going through the job search, that's also a learning process too, for sure. Thank you for sharing all of that. And then this is for Nina, but I know like you're going to be working abroad soon. Can you tell us a little bit about what's that like? What are you excited for? What are you nervous for?
Yeah, so my company, so I work for a telecommunications company and they're international, and they just opened up another office in Amsterdam. So I'm relocating there for a year, which is really exciting because part of the reason why I wanted to move into tech was to have more opportunities, access to higher income, opportunities, like moving abroad. So for me to have it at my first job was something I never really expected. It was something I thought I would have to work towards. So that was super exciting for me. Of course, it's like nerve-wracking trying to plan a whole move. People say, do a move, you'll be fun, but no one tells you about like taxes and new SIM cards and all that, you know? But I think the main point is that tech in general is a field where there's a lot of opportunities. And I think tech is very progressive when it comes to this, like in terms of like PTO, in terms of like benefits. I think a lot of other fields are behind. So I'm forever thankful for the opportunity that I have here. And I definitely do not think if I stayed in my previous field, I would have this opportunity. Like what other job would send me to Amsterdam? I don't know in my previous field of public policy what would happen once I became like some ambassador for the Netherlands, just not happening. So yeah, I think that's to say that like tech can change your life in unexpected ways, and you have access to opportunities that quite frankly, I never thought I would have. So great. And I think that's the most exciting thing is that like, I have this opportunity, you know?
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited for when you do like make the whole transition and move. And then Spencer, you said that, you know, having been an interview for your old company, Codazen, you said that the best applications are usually the more humble coder boot campers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Especially, you know, we have a range of students in the audience who are like currently in the boot camp, or maybe we have alumni, right? So feel free to elaborate a little more.
Yeah, so I was definitely an interviewer, did like 2 to 3 a week for my company, Codazen, which they're pretty much like a consulting company. They mainly work with Facebook. So we did a lot of Facebook work, which was pretty cool. But a lot of people, you know, we got a bunch of applicants, a lot of hotshot, like CS majors, people who think they know it all and stuff like that. And they would just absolutely botch it. And then the people who were, you know, in a coding boot camp, they kind of knew the fundamentals and they didn't, you know, they took it step by step and were able to kind of talk and speak out loud in comparison to like kind of sit and quietly, you know, work on the problem. They usually, the coding boot campers are typically the better ones. And we hired a lot of people like that. So you don't have to be a CS major to be hired, just FYI.
Awesome. I hope that like helps reassure, especially any of those who are like currently in the bootcamp or, you know, those who are looking, right? And then Isaac, you mentioned, you know, talking to some of your interviewers at your current company, a lot of them also do look at whether or not they like you, want to work with you versus how technically skilled you are past a certain level. So would you say in your experience, you know, with your interview process with Aspiration, would you say that is also essentially what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if I couldn't complete the technical challenge, I probably would have gone too much further in the interview. But once I was in like talking to actual engineers, the senior or like tech leads, they see the resume, like they know I'm from a boot camp. I don't have that much technical experience. So a lot of it just kind of came down to them trying to kind of mentor me through a bit of the process, talk about my project. I see my understanding of it. And well, I think a lot of it just came down to them gauging whether or not they liked me as a person. Because if they're going to hire an entry-level engineer, might as well be someone they like.
Yeah. And can I add on to this quickly?
Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna ask.
I feel like, so I interviewed at 6 different companies, and until I got to like the last interview with my current company, it felt like every time I did the interview, I was like, ooh, there's something off. It just didn't feel quite right because you have to remember you're also kind of interviewing them. When I got to my final company, I had 3 interviews and each one didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation. I was talking to them about things, and it was very evident that like, because A, I was having a conversation, I was technically skilled enough to be able to keep up, and B, it showed my curiosity and my interest. So it felt right. Like it was literally 3 conversations. So I think that's also important because when you're hiring someone, culture fit and culture add is a very big thing if it's going to be your coworker. So yeah, +1 to this.
Awesome. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, especially since, Nina, you work for telecommunications company, but also aside from that, remember, you're not working by yourself. You will continue to be working with someone else. So I think that's especially why a lot of, well, all companies, you know, really are looking not just like your skill, like tech skill set, because that can be taught, but especially how you carry yourself and how you can communicate, right? Well, like how you carry yourself within those conversations and interviews. So I think that's definitely good to take into consideration when you're going into interviews as well, right? And then Barbara, you said that a lot of it is culture fit. They want to see if you work well with your team, right? So that's you. Do you want to actually, Barbara, do you actually want to share some of like the culture at your company?
Sure. Yeah. Like, so pretty much going off like what I'm saying, they look to see if you're a culture fit. They look to see if you'll work well with other people, to see if you are teachable. That's one of the huge things that they look for. And at my company, I love the culture. Like, they're really relaxed. They pretty much don't care what you do as long as you get things done, but everyone's super like helpful, and we also get work done. And it's just really fun, just really relaxed, and I'm just really happy to be where I'm at right now.
That's so great to hear. Thank you for sharing. And, you know, I know it's also really great that you're able to work with Josh and also other LearningFuze alumni too. But also same for Frank at Wildfire, right? So you want to tell us a little about what the culture is like? Because I know there's a lot of, there's quite a bit of LearningFuze alumni.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so in my team and our, I guess what we call it, front end team, it's all LearningFuze alumni. And for those who don't know, we have a person in Uzair who is our team lead, and he was an instructor at LearningFuze a couple years back, or a year back. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome because, like, you know, half our team is all LearningFuze. So we're all like, we're not all strangers to each other. It's like we all know what we went through, you know, we could all relate. We talk about the cohort we were in and everything like that. And the company I'm working at, it's really awesome. I really love it a lot. And yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you know, it's funny. I love like the blog, like the staff spotlight or the team spotlight that your company does.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually how I crafted your about.
That's what I thought. I was like, where did she get this information? I'm like, oh, wait a second. We have the company spotlight. So, yeah.
Exactly. And you posted it in your featured section too. So I was like, excellent. TY.
Uzair wrote one, I wrote one, and I'm sure other people will write one too. And Sarah wrote one as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Oh, and then Nina, you said that, yeah, you want to see if they're culture fit for you, right? And that a startup made you come to happy hour and you did tequila shots.
Apparently it's not uncommon. I've talked to other people. It's those early stage startups can be very fun, but yeah, I don't aspire to work 12-hour days and drink to forget it.
Right.
So yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really good. And look where you are now, is at a company that where the values match, right? So that's really great to hear.
Yeah, similar to Barbara, I'm at a company where, like, as long as you're doing your job, you're good. So I really like that level of respect. So it's good culture fit for me.
Awesome. I love that. And then I'm going to open it up to some Q&A soon. So feel free to type in your question in the chat, or also feel free to raise your hand as well. But one of the questions I wanted to open up to the group was, you know, what transferable, I know we talked about communication and, you know, soft skills, but what transferable skills were you able to utilize from your past experiences in your job search, in coding, right, in your current job? And this is for any of you.
I guess to jump off my comment about communication, I think is coordination, because I think a lot of what you're doing at a company is like when you're so basically you get a ticket and you're told what to do, but sometimes you have to communicate with other people missing information in the ticket. I had one situation where, like, I was missing like information about an endpoint and I had to search for it. And like, I'm able to do it because I know full stack, but as a front-end engineer, I'm like, I don't have access to this information. So I talked to my boss about it and I was like, yo, like, this is an issue. And he's like, well, unfortunately, like, that's going to happen at any company you go to. Some companies are better than others, but part of the job as a developer is just being able to coordinate things. So I would say like, if you're lucky, 80% of your job is coding. But 20% of it is really just coordinating things. And that's something you have to get used to.
Awesome. And then Isaac, what about you?
Yeah. Wait, hold up. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
You're totally good. You're totally good.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Mhm.
So previously I worked as a researcher, and I think that I'm going to talk about more about like my current experience in work. And this is going to brush a little bit on imposter syndrome, because when I honestly still now, and especially my first week, I was thoroughly overwhelmed by everything that that they're throwing at us. Because as well as Tim and Cody teach us, as much as they know, like there is so much that you have no clue on. Like I was almost crying at the end of my first week. I was like, I have no idea how to do any of this. I don't know who to ask. I was devastated. I was like, I am thoroughly underqualified for this job. But I mean, having come from like a research background, it's always just like, there's always going to be things you don't know. You just have to take time to kind of research it on your own. Google is your best friend. Stack Overflow, GitHub. I think it really helped a lot. I've like being really open with my teammates, other senior devs, asking them for help whenever I need. Of course, like struggling with it a little bit on my own, and also saying that like, oh hey, these guys don't know everything either. You know, they're still Googling things. They're still looking at Stack Overflow, like pulling bits of code from here and there. So it's there's always so much more to learn. So just keep an open mind for that, and don't let yourself get too beat up about it.
Love that. Thank you. Barbara, what about you?
So for me, I think back when I started like my other career, what I learned that I really needed to do was ask questions. And I actually talked to Josh about this today, because we were saying how sometimes you don't want to ask questions because you think it's stupid or you don't want to look dumb, but you need to ask questions to learn, and also to take notes, because you don't want to ask the same questions over and over again. So that's one of the like huge things that I take with me everywhere. I think it's really good for anyone in any field to know.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And then Nina, you put in the chat. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, just kind of +1 to like feeling overwhelmed your first week at the job. I think LearningFuze is really great because they kind of teach you the right process of learning, which you kind of take into throughout your entire career. And that is learning how to research, learning how to Google, and reading the docs. Oh my God, please read the docs. But I think the main difference that I'm noticing between like my skill level versus like the senior engineers is that I just need to learn how to learn better. Like sometimes I'll be stuck on something, I'll ask my boss and he'll research it, and he will be like, I have no idea. So I think the main difference is just the confidence in your ability to figure something out. Because even like if my senior engineer, like my boss can't figure it out, then I'm like, okay, like it's just they have the experience to recognize it sooner rather than later than me. So I think that's something to add there. Also, I think community is very important. My first week was difficult, but then I finally reached out to the other junior engineers, my second month of the company. And then once I reached out to the other junior engineers, we started messaging each other. And I was like, hey, was that hard for you as well? And they were like, oh my God, thank God. I thought it was just me. Like, I thought I was dumb. So we realized that we all were in the same boat. We all thought we were dumb, but no, this stuff is hard. We're juniors, like we're not expected to know everything. So yeah, build community at your company, find other junior engineers. And when you're stuck, sometimes I know you should message your senior and your boss, but sometimes it's just nice to get the sanity check with someone who's your skill level before you're like, is this dumb? Should I send this to them? So yeah, community as well is really important, and like finding other people you can just like vent to or be like, is this hard, for like, just make sure,
Yeah, absolutely love that. And then Isaac, you said that you wasted 4 hours the other day trying to figure out how to implement something. We could have just spent 5 minutes reading documentation. I love that. You know what's funny is that when we do our, when the seniors present for their final projects, and when like for the piece of advice, a lot of the common ones is like doing flashcards, reading documentation. Those are like the top ones. Very, very classic. And then Sean, you have a question for a panelist, please.
Yeah. So I'm currently in the job grind. And it's been like a couple of weeks in, and it hasn't been bad at all, really. Because a lot of people associate with this job grinding in this field particularly as like very negative and stuff like that. But I did get a few responses, but I never made it to the second interview yet, just due to like relocation stuff. But I just wanted to ask because I feel like I'm like, going with the flow, and then I'm like kind of just pacing myself. But once I hit that first technical interview, I think like, I don't know, I'm just like really anticipating of what it will be like. So I just want to ask, what was your first like technical interview like? What was your like experience? Like, what did they talk about? Was it more like your project, or did they want you to build something for them? Or yeah.
I can answer this one. Honestly, it depends on the company. Sometimes you get things that are like, you need to build a calculator in like 10 minutes, and you're like, what? And then you get ones that are like, oh, can you like sort this algorithm? And you're like, oh, okay, I've been doing leak code. This is pretty simple. So it kind of just depends on the company. Kind of flipping over to the interviewer side, we always used to pick something that was CSS, HTML, and then we do something that was JavaScript that was like algorithm. So you go to like, is this a palindrome? Something super simple like that. But then, I also have had interviewers where it's like, you need to build a full stack app in like 3 days, and then yeah, good luck. And we'll see you like at the end of it. So it just depends, to be honest. But like I said earlier, leak code is awesome, or just algorithms.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I've been looking at leak code too.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna agree with Spencer here. I remember my first couple of technical interviews. I mean, some of them just kind of talked about your project, so definitely make sure you understand that like back to front. But I think a lot of the other ones are just like, hey, here's a problem. It's gonna be a live coding interview, and if you haven't coded in front of anybody recently, I definitely recommend you do it, because the moment you have some audience, I think I froze up. It was the easiest algorithm, and I spent like 30 minutes just tripping over my feet on it, and it was pretty frustrating. I think I actually have a couple of those algorithm questions saved. If you want to reach out to me afterwards, I can forward them on to you once extra practice.
Yeah, definitely.
And if I could add on to that, so my first interview, I kind of failed it because they tested me in CSS that we learned in week 1 of our bootcamp. And my excuses at the time, I was like doing part-time work for a startup with a CSS library. And I'm like, who asked CSS in an interview? I was doing like too much leak code actually, where I was doing these complicated things, and it's like, oh, can you make a flag? And I completely bombed. And then after the fact, I'm like, I know how to make a flag. So I spent 5 minutes of my time and I was able to do it. And I think the takeaway from this is like, it's just practice experience. If you mess up, it'll give you confidence with the next interview, because it's like, okay, I got the nerves out in this interview. But the other thing is that I wish I asked if I could have used the documentation. I think a good company will let you look at documentation, because that's what you'll be doing at the job. Because if you just have it memorized, I'm like, that doesn't prove anything that you're able to research if you don't know something. So I wish I looked and was like, hey, like I'm kind of rusty on this. Do you mind if I look up the documentation? So that's what I regretted. Also, I know this is a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I did leak code to an extent. I definitely did not grind it because I absolutely hated it. I was trying to do like full stack positions back and front end. And then when I was honest with myself, I realized I was drawn to front end roles, which don't really do as much of algorithm challenges, because I don't really think it's applicable to the job. Even my boss said, like, I don't care if you can do an algorithm, but can you like center a div kind of thing? So what front end positions tend to do instead is like is a paired programming interview. There's a really good video you can look online. I think it's like the creative like algo expert does the interview. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so because I focus on front end roles, I kind of gave up on the leak code race, because at least for an entry level position, you don't need it as much. Eventually later in your career, it's kind of like standard for like FANG companies and like bigger companies to want it, even if it's not really what you do on the job. But yeah, that was a little bit of my experience. Is I kind of gave up on the leak code race, but whiteboard wizards, definitely do it for that experience of coding in front of other people.
Yeah, I think I put it in the chat. Yeah, whiteboard wizards, everyone. Definitely come through to whiteboard wizards. That would is definitely helpful, right? Because now you're also coding in front of your peers, right? But also it's like a learning experience, right? Because you're doing it with your peers. And then it looks like everyone might want to brush up on their CSS skills because Spencer's company also is also asked the black question.
Don't underestimate CSS. I honestly find it trickier than JavaScript most of the time when it gets to like transitions and like the niche details of it.
And like to add on to that, sometimes like for my first one, I bombed it, like completely bombed it. I didn't realize that it was a timed thing. So I was just reading the questions and I didn't realize that it was actually expiring. So I didn't answer like maybe 3 out of 15 questions. And I think during my technical, it was a take-home assessment, and it was based on React. And at that point, I hadn't looked into React hooks, so there was a lot of questions on that as well. So sometimes there's not much you can do about it, but you just take your wins and you take your losses.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. And then, yeah, we'll also share Ellie's question. So do any of you have suggestions for any YouTubers, podcasters, or websites to follow for inspiration for projects to bulk up the resume?
Yeah, I have a quick one. If you're super into front end like me, I think a lot of us are into front end, but there is a cool website called Awards, but it's AWWWARDS. And I would just go on every once in a while and check out like the cool, it's pretty much like a site for really cool websites. So you can just see like all these really cool, like best of the best designers and, software engineers and whatnot. And just being able to replicate some of the stuff is a challenge, but a lot of fun too. So would recommend it.
Yeah, I posted it in the chat, so thank you. Yeah, I definitely like it's so crazy, like, a lot of scrolling animation. I mean, yes, there can be too many scrolling animation, but it is good to like especially practice those. I think one of my favorite challenges that I saw was like the toggle button. Right, you have a toggle button, but like it was the holidays, so there's like an ornament toggle. So you have an ornament, but instead of like click click, it's like it rolls to the other side when you click. So I saw that one as like a GIF for sure.
There's also this
Awesome.
other website I found when I was job hunting. I think some of my friends also it's like cofolios.com. I just put the link. I know not all the websites are still working, but I think they're all like pretty decent websites to try to mimic the designs if you want to look for extra practice on your own time once you're done with the LearningFuze.
Also a very good site. Thank you. Great for sharing. And then Michael asked, during your job search, did any of you have a routine or a schedule? If so, what did it consist of?
I will say that I did not have a routine for a little while, and it wasn't until I got a routine that I actually started making progress after, the boot camp. So that's when I started doing like 10 leak codes a day, doing like a flag or doing a little project, stuff like that. And, my goal was just, get X amount of resumes out. So definitely think of one, just find one that works well for you.
Yeah, I think the 30 apps a week worked pretty well for me because that gives you enough time to kind of work on leak code or slack off a little bit if you're really not up for it that day. But it's still like a good number that you're pumping out. So I tried to do I think I tried to like maintain a similar like 9 to 5 work schedule where it's like on my weekdays I do 5 apps a day, do some leak coding after that, and then I forget, but something like that.
Don't forget to throw in some networking.
Hey, yeah, that's really important because even if it doesn't work now, maybe your second job. I think my experience is very different, and now I have an explanation for it. So when I was doing the job hunt, it was super hard for me to like want to apply to jobs. People were doing like 9 to 5 every day, and I'm like, I just could not understand how people could do it. And then eventually when I was on LinkedIn, someone from my old college was like, hey, I'm doing this startup. Do you want to help out? And I'm like, cool, it's free, but I need experience because I was really rusty at the point. And I even though I was not paid, I'm so happy for the opportunity because it gave me the structure I didn't know I needed in order to apply for jobs. And then I started TAing, and that really helped me. And to get a little bit more personal here, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. So for me, it having to have a routine and have a structure just never worked for me, and I could never understand why. So once I finally figured that out, it was like, oh, my job search makes so much more sense because I felt like I was inadequate because all my other peers were like doing so much more work than I was. So I think that's one thing that's very important, is to remember your mental health, and like remember that you are human, you know, and like the job search is a job in itself. It's tough, it's hard, and like you need money at one point. So just kind of remind yourself that like, hey, it's tough, and do what kind of works for you. I feel like just in general, like I feel like there's so much advice out there and people have very different opinions on what you should do to get a job. But the advice that matters is the one that works for you. For example, I networked, but I got my job by mass applying. Even though both were important, it's what worked for me. Or like I got my job because I started focusing on like pair programming interviews instead of leak coding. So like, I guess my advice is like, routine's important. Figuring out what works for you is going to get you through the job search versus like trying to force yourself to do something if you know it's not working.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, you know, being vulnerable as well. And then before we answer Sean's question, but Frank, I saw that you kind of put in the chat for like how you cope with imposter syndrome. Do you just want to elaborate a little bit more like verbally?
Sure, yeah. So imposter syndrome is something we all face. I mean, that's just the reality of the fact. Even when I was in teaching, I still face imposter syndrome in front of 30 little kids, even though they can't tell I'm nervous or not. But the one thing I tell myself is, you know, it's like imposter syndrome. It's like, how do you like cope with it? Like what's the best way to go about it? So what I use is called, I read this somewhere, that's why I know about this. It's called the aggregation of marginal gains. So basically what that means is that, you know, obviously, let's say you gotta do this big project. It's like, oh man, it's overwhelming. How am I gonna get this? I don't know anything. But, you know, as long as you improve 1% a day and compound on top of it, it's like, do I know 1% more? Okay, good. The next day, do I know from what I previously learned, add on top of that, learn another percent, and you keep going at it, and you'll eventually get there. It's kind of the mindset, because you want to just keep pushing yourself forward, but you want to tell yourself, hey, I'm doing a good job. You know, I know more than what I did before, and I could keep learning more and more. So as long as you, it's a trick to tell your mind. As long as you improve 1% a day, then you know you're doing well. So that's what works for me to cope with imposter syndrome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And then Sean, what is your question?
Yeah, I have two. First one is, what's the flag question? Is it like a specific question?
Oh, it's just create a flag using CSS only.
Oh,
it's pretty simple. Yeah. If you go to like CodePen or something like that, and you just type in CSS.
It is so easy. So when I say I bombed, I bombed. Funny thing is, I interviewed for a second position at the company, and it turns out I was actually like the second candidate, but they went with someone who had more experience. So even though I bombed that interview, I almost got the other job at that company. So all hope is not lost, and it forced me to re-examine my fundamentals. So when I say learn your fundamentals and make sure you're solid on them, because at the end of the day, that is everything. And then what you don't know is just your documentation.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The second one, for the people that did like leak code, because I kind of, okay, what I'm doing right now is code signal, because that was like recommended after we're done with our algorithms. And so I've been doing that. But I'm still like, you know, struggling with code signal stuff. But when I go on to leak code, it's kind of like, you know, it's like totally different, I feel like. And so my question, I guess, would be, how do you guys approach the leak code questions that, you know, you are foreign to or you're novel to? Is there like, would you like search up the solution and then try to learn the pattern and recognize it and then try doing the problem later? Or like, is there like a best kind of way to like learn how to do these problems, I guess?
You just answered your own question.
Okay.
You usually study the solutions first. Some of the easier ones you don't do it, but as you get more advanced, it's like pattern recognizing. So it's like, how would you figure out this pattern on your own? So read the solutions first. The other thing is that sometimes like the most optimal solution is just bad code, because you want your code to also be readable. So even though it's faster, I'm like, if I saw that code in your code base, I didn't understand it, I'm going to be going to that git blame, seeing who wrote it, and be like, what idiot tried to sound smart, but what is this code? So yeah, definitely read the solutions first, but also recognize some of them are just like people trying to be smart, but it's bad code. But I will leave it to the other people who actually leak coded more than me.
I think the other thing too is that a lot of the elite code questions, they're like groups, or like there's different categories of each one. And so like once you see one, you kind of know what they look like, even though it sounds differently. So learning to recognize what it's asking for can sometimes help out, such as like, you know, sorting algorithm, but it's asked a weird way or something like that. So just kind of recognizing patterns can start helping out. And to be quite honest, a lot of the elite code stuff is a lot of learning a bunch of stuff to be ready for any question. And so.
Also, did you guys go back to your code and refactor it so that, you know, your time complexity could be better?
Oh no,
I know that's
the only reason. Yeah, the only time I refactored was from not hooks to hooks, but that was just from learning.
Okay. I see. All right, sweet, thanks.
Awesome. And then I sent over an image in the chat too, and it's kind of like where there's like two people going upstairs, but one stair is like shorter. And then the quick caption is like, oh, look at how, what was it? Oh, sorry. It's like, oh, look how far behind they are. They must not be working as hard. But the other guy's flight of stairs start like from the very bottom. So I think that's also another thing, is like, just because your pathway might be a little bit shorter does not discount, you know, other people's like pathways and progress that they make towards their journeys, right? And then Justin asked a question first, and then I'll hop on to Steve. So Justin, he said, I noticed a lot of entry level or junior developer jobs ask for a couple of years of a software experience. How did you guys approach situations like this in your job hunt? Did you guys still apply to places that you knew you were underqualified for?
Oh yeah, 100%. Every single one of them.
I will second that. I applied to like, I think 4 years they're asking. I just applied and just took my chances.
My job was mid-level and they liked me so much they gave me a junior role. Same thing happened to my coworker who just started yesterday. She applied for senior, but they liked her so much she's now mid-level. So yeah, if you impress them enough, they will try to like figure out how to keep you if you're like not at the role yet.
Yeah, definitely apply for everything. The worst that'll happen is that they ghost you and you lose nothing. You lost maybe like 15 minutes of your time you spent sending out the app. But I think the payoffs are pretty great. Like the job I have now, I applied to a mid-level backend position. LearningFuze doesn't cover backend as thoroughly as front end. And it was a mid-level position. I really thought I had no shot, but here I am coding in a language I don't know for this company. So just go for it.
Yeah, honestly, just go for it for sure. And then Steve, you'll be our last question of the night.
I was just going to ask about cover letters. Do we need them? What should they look like?
I think I wrote about like 4 or 5. I gave up on them, but people have different opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I created like a template and it would just be like, I'm really excited to work at insert place. And that's all I did every single time. So write one and then just send it out to all of them.
Though,
Yeah.
going off that, you want to make sure that you have the right company name if you use the same template, because there have been many cases that I've heard of that, you know.
Wait, I think one of my friends did that. I think John did that, but like he still got the job in the end in one of the emails. So he was like, oh. Yeah, I think cover letters are important if it's a company you really like and you really like, I really want this job. But otherwise, I don't really think that many companies read it as much. But
yeah, I definitely second that. But also, like, you know, if it's required, then yeah, you're required.
Oh, 100%.
If it's required, then yeah, you're gonna need one.
Yeah, I think what worked for me is like I did one-click applying on LinkedIn, but with a purpose. You know, you're not just going to apply to everything. You're going to apply with things you think you're a good fit for. I focus on like front-end roles and like React, JavaScript experience. And the other tip I can give you is if you're on LinkedIn, I thought to say Facebook, wrong platform, you can filter by how many people applied. So if you're applying to roles with like over 300 people, like odds are you're probably not going to get it. For my company's role at the time, only 43 people applied through LinkedIn. Obviously, people applied from other platforms as well, but at least on LinkedIn, it was 43 versus 300 people. Also, a lot of the reason why these companies don't have that many applicants is just because they're not paying for the LinkedIn algorithm to bump them up. Of course, there's some like sketchy ones where you're like, okay, this is clearly not a real job, but most of the time it's just because they're not paying LinkedIn. And that point was proved to me when like LearningFuze was hiring someone for like the data science teacher role, and TJ, who was previously one of the career counselors, showed that like only 18 people applied. And I'm like, what? Like, we know LearningFuze is legit. We know it's a good company. So like that was kind of proof that like just because there's less applicants doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means they didn't pay money to LinkedIn to like bump them up. So yeah,
Right,
one click apply with a purpose.
That's very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And then Ken said that like, you know, like putting the wrong company, right, has happened to him before. And then
so it was Ken, not John. I remember one of my friends in that group telling me that.
Oh my gosh. And then, yeah, Sean also made a good point. You know, if the company size is small, he would send one. Otherwise, if it's a large company, I wouldn't send one. So that's really good advice too around cover letters. Very nice. And then last question for all of you. Are you open to everyone connecting with you on LinkedIn, right? Or, you know, if you're a student on the Slack, you know, through Slack too.
No, LinkedIn is terrible. Don't be on it. Yeah, Slack, and I'll try to send my LinkedIn, but I'm on a new laptop. So I'm like, shoot, I don't have a link.
Let me see if I have mine. But yes, people can connect with me.
Yeah, LinkedIn's fine. I'll same as what Spencer saying in the chat. Like, I don't respond to LinkedIn as frequently as Slack. So if you actually do have a question, you want like a quicker answer, Slack is definitely the better way to go for me.
Nice.
Yeah, same here. Send it over on Slack. I'll respond more quickly and actually respond.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah. So now you all have +5 connections, right? Oh yes. And then everyone is in the LearningFuze Slack. So yeah, Slack is definitely good too, but also LinkedIn to connect, you know, +5 connections is good. But I also sent the brochure that has like, you know, everyone's like LinkedIn's if you're also interested too. But yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you to the panelists, but also especially thank you to our audience and the students, right? So really hope that you all learned something, whether it's from each other or if you're like one of the students and alumni, if from the panelists. Really glad that we were able to host this. So again, thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you.
Miss you guys.
Bye. Bye. Good luck. Y'all got this.
Love.